Hi, this is Carrie, and welcome to Tandem Talks, a podcast meant to empower you to live your life your way.
And I'm Craig. Join us as we go deeper with entrepreneurs and their journey creating success in business and life. Welcome, folks, to Tandem Talks. We're here in a very special episode with our guest, Carrie Bolig, I guess, as the guest. So, yeah, we want to talk a little...
Are you my guest, I think?
Yeah, whichever. We'll debate about that later, I'm sure. The idea, or something that's been near and dear in our hearts, is something we have very much lived in the last year, and that is pushing yourself to the fringe of your competency, and at times for us beyond, or at least for me. And just doing something new, like putting yourself out there. And we talk about this a lot, but, we had a business partner, a mentor of ours once say that the entrepreneur is driven by the vision and the employee is driven by fear, right? And so I think that that's probably oversimplified, like, quite frankly, but in general, it's like, are you being driven by the vision of the life you want to manifest and what you want to create, or are you being like too careful and too overcautious?
Too timid, yeah.
Yeah, and as a former risk analyst, man, as you know, and our audience will get to know, I can analyze anything and overanalyze it and waste and burn a lot of life and time. But at some point too, you just have to jump, you just have to leap. And so, Carrie, I think you've always been particularly skilled at that and just sort of that like go for it attitude. So can you walk us through a little bit on how you push through when you attack something new or when something new comes up, and maybe mention some of the things we've done in the last year that were totally out of our comfort zone? Like if you had said, hey, you're doing this 15 months ago, we would have been like, you're crazy.
Yeah. And it was crazy. And that's sort of the adventurous spirit that I like to harness. I mean, that feeling of adrenaline where you could perceive it as anxiety or you could perceive it as like a big adrenaline rush.
Right.
And choosing most days the adrenaline rush, like positive option, adventurous spirit. And then also just knowing that like there's always a safety net. In anything that we did this last year, there's a safety net. And that safety net is knowing that likely if the worst case scenario did happen, which is unlikely, that like we would be okay.
Totally.
And I think when you get to that space of confidence and maybe deeper faith in a sense, I believe you can face the world and your endeavors or, your side hustle, if that's the route you're going, with just a lot less fear. But I don't think it's ever going to be no fear. Like I had a ton of fear this last year. It was, how do I sit with that though and be uncomfortable and do the thing anyways, quite frankly. So we started a podcast you are listening to, audience. So thank you for being here. We started that. That was the first time we've been on a lot of podcasts. We've never interviewed and run our own. We bought a lake house, which was all new. Also doing it as some rental property, which is a newer venture. We wrote a book, hardest thing we've ever done. Also one of the most rewarding things that we've ever done. So there's a correlation there. Started a nonprofit, co-founding a tech company, a tech startup. I mean, a lot of things in the hopper. And sometimes when people ask you, what do you do? And I start to share, it's like I don't know where to start. And none of it is really that relatable, especially when you're on like the third or fourth thing.
Yeah.
So it's not a relatable way to live, but I'll again say that that's where the biggest reward has come in my life, is just being willing to be unconventional in terms of what we add to the plate, what we're willing to tackle. And all those are also side hustles. So none of those are have been like front hustle, 40, 50 hour week projects for us. That's actually more of the fun stuff, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason we built what we built is so that we could think of life as more of a playground than like a manufacturing plant, right? Like I think a lot of people just like go to their job and it's like, and it's like this grind, and then they're trying to manufacture money or a product, and it's like, forget that. Let's just make enough, or at least reasonable enough, so that we can then go to life and like, dude, hey, I want to climb on the monkey bars, or I want to do a penny drop and fall on my back and lose my breath like I did in fourth grade or whatever.
I did that too in fourth grade.
Everybody's done that. If you haven't done that, you haven't lived. Go do that. It's not a hard recommendation, but so there's just like this sense of adventure that I think people need to embrace, and we talk about it, adventure, right? And so what do you think it is that holds so many people back is like they hit that fear, but then they're also not surrounded by the right people who are taking risks and winning and losing. And then they're seeing them win and get the rewards, and they're seeing them lose and be fine.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's so much about our associations. And like when we started to get around more and more entrepreneurs, it was like, dude, I remember being a commercial banker and like relating way more to the entrepreneurs eventually because we had built, our businesses up to a point of a few million in revenue. And like, I think the business owners liked me more than their other bankers because I was like just very candid and like spoke directly. And it was just like, I just identified with that mindset. And so I think a lot of people are more entrepreneurial than they realize. It just hasn't been nurtured and they haven't had an environment to like take those risks.
Yeah. Well, and failure isn't like 100% or 0%. It's like your mom had a kidney transplant, my dad had a heart transplant, and we talk about rejection after a transplant. It's not black or white. Like there's percentages of rejection someone can have after that. And I feel that way about success and failure. Like there were a lot of failures on the way to creating a book with a major publishing firm. So people, I think, almost have to reframe what failure actually means to them. And I think what holds a lot of people back is like this idea of perfectionism, which one of the most beautiful, colorful quotes I've ever heard about that is perfectionism is fear dressed in fancy high heels. And like no one is going to perfectly scale any type of business, any type of career, any type of developing of a child if you're a parent. So why are we thinking in those terms? We have to be better suited to operate more in the gray of like there's going to be a lot of both.
Yeah, 1,000%. And if you hold on to the failure and you learn from it, then it doesn't become like this epic failure that is now an icon of your identity. Right? It's just an experience that you're pushing through and then using it as a tool to get better, which I think we've learned how to do. I'm still, tend to be very hesitant on like taking on risk, but it is just like so exhilarating to like live that way versus live out of this, like, I want to control life and I want to control fear. And because we can't control it anyways to begin with.
No, and you will die trying.
Yeah.
You'll control it.
you'll suck a lot of the life and enthusiasm out because you're so busy trying to control a result of like very little.
Yeah.
I felt that way sometimes in the corporate world early on. So someone's coming up against that like hurdle. They're like, oh man, I don't like being uncomfortable. I can't try this. I can't try that. Like, what are maybe some tips that you could share with people to push through? I mean, we've shared a couple things already, but what else comes to mind in terms of, somebody just sitting at home, in their basement right now, plugging away on their laptop? What would you say to those people?
I think there's a lot of baby steps. Sure. And again, people thinking all in or all out. It's like, hey, go to a networking event, like meet some people, right? Maybe create a little content, post it on social media. Start to do some reading, start to do some research, but you have to really own the process. Like if you're going to do something outside of a full-time job, no one's going to hand you a manual. You've got to go find the manual, and it might be buried under a lot of stuff. So do you have like the gumption and the grit to go find the right tools that you need and the right people? And they're probably not in your house. So you're going to have to leave your home.
Yeah, they're probably not the people you currently know. That's the problem.
Yeah, they're not in your call log either, right?
Yeah.
You got to go.
It's uncomfortable to even make the call, right? Like, I mean, some of the calls I've made just in the last couple months, it's like people haven't called me back because they're...
And are you okay?
I'm awesome. It makes me more determined to get them to be my friend. It makes me more determined for them to return my phone call. So I'll work even harder at it.
Yeah.
And I'm cool. Like, I don't hold it against folks. Like, if people are successful, they're busy. It should be hard to get unsuccessful. Totally. You shouldn't get them your first swing most of the time, unless you just happen to call, Bill Gates and he's by the phone, or Gary, maybe he's a bad example right now, Gary Vaynerchuk, or maybe they're all bad exexamples. Whoever you think is successful, like they're not waiting at the phone for your call. Like they're just not, and they should not. You should have to pursue it a little bit.
Well, and one reason why I fought really hard in our book to have a whole chapter on growing you as you grow your business and growing your self-image is because I feel like at the end of the day, if you don't have a strong self-image, you're likely going to avoid even having someone not return your phone call.
Right.
Because it's going to beat you up so much, like you suck as a human being because
Right.
that person didn't call you back, or
Right.
you're not destined to be successful, or you're not worthy. And I think that deeper confidence, you have to work on that and grow that. Otherwise, everything will feel like a big blow to who you are as a person. And that's just like not reality. That's not the case. And that's why people that are successful get beat up with so much rejection and failure.
Or an internet negativity or whatever else, right?
All of it, right? But they're still able to push through and be a confident person nonetheless and do what they need to do to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the biggest themes I think so far from this discussion is get around people who can elevate you and are winning and failing and cool with it either way. Because those people are super refreshing.
Well, just incredibly energizing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, someone, that I started hanging out with recently, and they just haven't built any businesses, but they've always sort of had an interest. And, I'm like, dude, don't hang out with me too long. I'll have you investing in things and like starting projects. Like you won't even know what's going on, because it's just like, it's so, it's energizing, I guess is the right word. So, let's talk a little bit more about the fringe of competency. I mean, there's some things that we ran up against. Let's say, writing a book, we got waxed super hard. I mean, like I was on the verge of tears. I did not cry.
I don't think I cried either, but internally I was crying.
I wanted to cry, and I felt worse than crying. Like, what's beyond crying?
Maybe falling to your knees.
Maybe despair is not like a little strong. But I mean, when you write multiple chapters, and then the one editor says, and our editors are great, by the way. And we've never written a book, so we didn't know what we were doing, which is the point of it, right? But like, hey, rewrite that chapter. Let's do it a different. So then we rewrite it, right? And then another editor comes and says, let's actually go back to the original chapter. You're like, okay. And then they scrap both chapters, and each of those are hours of work. I mean, you consolidated 3 chapters into one, and then that one got cut. And it's like, oh man, I felt bad for you that day.
I felt your empathy. I did.
Yeah, but like, that's okay. Like how can you expect to be good at something you've never done?
Yeah.
That is just ridiculous. And so quit trying to own the results. And we talk about first develop the right habits. Through the habits, you'll create a skill. And then through the skill, you'll get the results. And so many people want to skip the habit and they want to go right to, well, I should be skilled. So you got to push through that. Right.
I remember in one of my favorite moments writing the book, I see a note from our editor in the document, and all it says is, I hate this. I hate this, period. And it was a sentence I had written, and I just remember thinking, man, we are going next level. Like, if this is the level of direct feedback we are receiving, like, we must be doing something right. Where someone thinks, hey, this is like, she can handle this. She needs this. Yeah. Let's move along here. We got to think efficiency. So as heart-wrenching as it was for like a split second, I so appreciated that. And it was just such like non-bullshit where there was no confusion and no argument, right? It was just like, all right, yep, that's not going to be in the published book.
I hate this. That's awesome. And we did have multiple editors, by the way, work on a book, and they were all wonderful.
They were all amazing. Yeah.
So, and then so I think you should just quit writing, forego the book, burn it when that happens. Is that like what you did?
No.
I mean, that's a leading question.
Yeah, no. We clearly didn't do that. I think it nudged me, like, this person believes in me enough to think that like I can do better than this. Because I don't even think it was bad, but she hated it. She's got way more expertise and results than I do. And I felt, in a sense, like what a good coach does when they really believe in somebody to just like bring a stronger game.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
1,000%. So, but we got waxed, and it was great. It was awesome because now if someone was like, hey, Craig, you should write a book, or we decide to write a book, we'll do it so much better. And I'm sure by the 3rd or 4th, it's completely different. And if someone comes to us, it's like our universe has expanded, right? We were just on a live interview with WGN out of Chicago for the book. Woohoo.
Yeah.
Right. And like, we've never done a live TV interview before. We've done tons of public speaking. We've been on podcasts. We're starting to host a podcast, but there was like, my heart was just like fluttering a little bit. It's like, man, what if I accidentally pick my nose like I did in that video a few weeks ago, and like called me out on it, you know? I'm like more worried about like strapping my hands down, but like, man, it's live, right? And probably thousands, if not, you know, obviously that's a 1 million person audience or plus, right? So you have to be able to live on the edge and be able to embrace that fear. What other tips can we give for people?
Well, I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
So in writing the book, we got an abundance of feedback, a plethora of feedback. And as coaches, especially you, I think you're an exceptional feedback giver to people.
Yeah.
How did that change your frame of reference being on the other side in like such an intimate way? Did that change how you're giving feedback or how you think about that with your relationship with other people?
Not a lot. I think it made me a little more sensitive to just being mindful of where someone's at versus just rattling off feedback.
Yeah.
Because I think when someone has been beaten up repeatedly, you know, it's tough as a coach to, you know, keep hammering them, even though, you know, that's maybe what they need, or trying to help them elevate, and some level of like acceptance and encouragement, right? Because, you know, our literary agent was so amazing because she's like the most like wonderful, like
biggest
positive cheerleader. Everything's great. Like, we just call her and we're like, oh, okay, we're going to be all right, you know? And so I think being able to be both of that is important.
That's what I learned too. I felt like it was a really good gut check for sure.
You gave me a leading question, honey.
You're welcome.
Okay. So, but the other side of that though, too, is that I felt like I had more integrity giving feedback, because I'm like, it felt really good to continue to give feedback very straightforward for people that I'm mentoring, because it's like, hey, this is how it is. And if you think I'm harsh, get an editor, you know, like it's been awesome, because now I feel like even more receptive to feedback, you know, and I almost feel like people don't give it to me enough. It's like, I want more of it so that I can use it as data to get better and elevate. And I think, you know, I put a executive summary together for a company, and, you know, had some investors take a look at it, and some of them gave me some feedback, but it was like, no, like, and they're like, oh, sorry if this is, it's like, no, just like, dude, that's nothing. Like, you're my editor, like, just bring it, you know, just how do I be better versus like, how do I protect my ego and feel good about myself?
Yeah. Well, and I think if the goal is growth for someone, you know, if you're out there looking to start a side hustle and the goal is growth, are you willing and able and ready to take on a bit more feedback in your life? Because change has to happen if you're going to do something new. Your mindset's going to need to evolve. You're going to need to change internally in a variety of different ways. So I think it's a good question, is like, where are you at in your journey of willingness? And who are the people you do trust and respect in terms of the results that they've created to actually maybe gain some of that insight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's just talk really briefly about, as we're on the topic of feedback, getting feedback that's hurtful or harmful or toxic. Like, how do you process that? And I think for me, when I'm getting feedback from someone, if I know their intentions are pure, I weight it more heavily. If I know they've created actual credibility in a certain arena, I weight it more heavily. If they know me personally, I weight it more heavily. Then it has a lot more gravity. But if somebody doesn't know me, or they don't have an expertise in a particular area, or they're just off and they have their own garbage going on in their mind, you have to learn how to let that go too.
Yeah, qualifying people big time.
Yes. And so whatever you do, you're going to have that feedback. But if someone hasn't built a company, a business, a side hustle, why are you caring what they think, right? I mean, that's just, you should care that your family loves you and you want to support them and vice versa, but we can't take their opinion and onboard it as like, oh, your book sucks. Well, you've never written a book.
Doesn't mean it won't feel bad though. And I think that's
super good point.
What's important, right?
Super good point. Yeah. But you move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's helped us this last year, like push, is also like knowing that the adventure and the enjoyment and the reward is greater than anything else that could happen if it works. Yeah. And so like I remember you and Kyle and Lauren, we're ready to buy this lake house. And I like woke up that morning not planning to drop, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a lake house. And so I'm like, nah, that ain't happening. But then, you guys were so adamant about it that I was like, man, I got to live and let live and just like roll with this. So then I spent like the next 12 hours looking at every single thing on Zoom and not sleeping that night till I found
on
Zillow, sorry, to try to find a better property, and I couldn't. So then I was on board. But like, yeah, there's got to be that sense of like, hey, the value of us having a place for our kids and creating like childhood memories for them and like our parents and stuff is like bigger than if we lose a little money.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
Yeah, you are. You're so good at it. Thank you. for nudging me out and about. So one of our themes is bringing you close to things that matter most. And I think how we feel about ourselves when we're not with other people is near the top of what's most important. And for me, I know taking certain risks and being willing to swing the bat and go for it in life is a way that I feel good about myself. And you don't have to do it all the time. I mean, life would be total chaos if that's like what it was. I remember, I think it was Anthony Robbins said that human beings absolutely crave variety and adventure, and we absolutely crave security and predictability. And so it's about finding like what is the right balance in your own life, right? Because we all want to have adventures and we all want to have security. And so being able to play around with that is fun, but you won't know until you play around.
Yeah, you got to figure out what your edges are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understand your own thresholds and where to push and where to pull.
Yeah.
So, but I think the biggest thing from today's conversation for anyone in the audience who's like taking a look at side hustles, or maybe you're actively building yours, is like, how am I approaching failure? How am I approaching feedback? How am I actually approaching getting out of my comfort zone? Because for us, all of those things were so central to our journey and continue to be.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to avoid them all altogether, we just want this to be a disclaimer that like harness it, embrace it. It's part of the journey. And as I always share, like enjoy the grind, enjoy the process, enjoy being in the pursuit. And we're cheering you on here in Wisconsin. And we hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Take care.
Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to today's episode.
Please subscribe and leave a review, and be sure to visit tandemconsulting.co/talks.